Oh, and I'm recording. It's always weird talking to yourself. Hey everyone, welcome to, I don't know, I'm calling it COVID 2219. I'm Travis Singleton of 2219. I have two other people here with me, and we're discussing how the COVID 19 pandemic has affected us and the people around us and what we're doing and um, everything. So, first, I'm going to bring in Cam. And Cam, introduce yourself, please.
All right. Well, good morning, Travis. Cam Godey. I'm a longtime Dundas, Ontario resident. I am still working as of today's date. Obviously, spending a lot more time at home as well, like everyone else, and just sort of navigating this unprecedented event like everybody else. So, learning as we go.
Perfect. Thanks for joining me. And then next up we have Rob. Good morning, Rob.
Hey, my name is Rob Bell. I'm a friend of these two gents, and like everybody else on the planet, I am living through this moment in history, and looking forward to the opportunity to reflect on it and to compare notes.
And Rob, Cam said he's still working. Are you still working?
Sorry, yes, yeah, still working, and thankful to be so.
Cool. Whereas myself, I am not working. I'm making videos like this, but getting paid, no, the government's paying me um, right now, which I'd like to also say that, so Monday was the day for me to apply for the government assistance. I applied Monday morning and I saw the direct deposit Wednesday morning. It was really quick, really easy.
Whoa,
Wow,
that's impressive.
that is very impressive. So they have it together
Yeah, and it
because
was it was backdated, so it was a whole month got paid out on Wednesday, and then
I've
Monday the 12th, and so in 2 days, today's Friday the 10th. On Monday, I apply again for I think it's a half period.
because I've heard and this is hearsay. I'm getting this from I don't know, a website, but the U.S. some of the U.S. Remuneration systems aren't going to kick in for months, and now that may have been business loans versus individual assistance. But it's anyway. That's awesome that the Canadian government is that streamlined.
Yeah, I think overall I'm very impressed with federal and provincial leaders at this point, or at least the Ontario leader. Um, I'm not a big fan of the Fords, but I think he put on his big boy pants, pulled them up, and has done very well. I'm actually quite impressed for a guy I don't care for.
Well, we had the same conversation last night when we had our virtual pub night. We got on the similar topic, of course, and we talk both federally and provincially as it relates to us here in Ontario, and it was pretty unanimous how impressed we were with both Ford and Trudeau, in spite of really not myself anyway, not being fans of either one. So the leadership shown, especially when we compare it to what we see south of the border and in other places, has been pretty rock solid, in my opinion, anyway.
It reminds me of I read a biography of early American presidents and the impact of history. It's a David McCullough biography of John Adams, I think, and Adams in his diary talks about waiting. He felt his own potential as an individual, but waiting for history to give him a window to be who he felt he could be, and it did. The American War of Independence was what it was, but we're seeing this. I think we're seeing people being able to step up and eschew their the jingoism and limitations of party politics that have maybe hung on them in periods in the period of history leading up to this moment, which perhaps asked less of them or demanded less of them. And both the individuals, Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau, have stepped up in ways that are both surprising and impressive. When both of them speak, I feel like I'm part of the team, and that's perhaps not always been the case.
So let me ask, we'll talk federally first and then provincially. Do you each of you feel, we'll start with Rob, do you feel they've done enough, not enough, or could they have done more for us, Rob?
Yeah, I'm not in any way critical. I know there's the pundits on in oppositional corners that will have stepped up to criticize. No, I think personally, I think they have stepped up in huge and broadly generous ways. I don't know what we're going to look like in a year or 2 years, but the good that's there, the families that are still together, the businesses that are still in business, the homes that are still owned by their owners, it'll be because of those measures. Obviously, there's the role of individuals and what they're able to do for themselves, but will there be damage? Like it's almost like we're in a forest fire. Are there things that are going to be burned down? Yes, there are, and tragically so. But that which is standing will in large part be because of the leadership of individuals, and I'm thinking specifically of Trudeau and Ford, and I'm sure it's also true in other jurisdictions. But I hope we have the humility to look back and appreciate what they've done, and not to be critical of the fact that people were handed this. Could we have all seen it coming? Yes, I watched it come, but I didn't really truly believe. It was like I was watching a TV show. I didn't really believe it would ever be here in this way.
Yeah.
And I think that was true for world leaders as well. And anybody who wants to pontificate and throw mud at the people who are wearing the mantle of leadership and all the burdens that go with it, should be careful before they pick up the dirt.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so many words to branch off there, but Cam, satisfied with the response?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Rob said. I mean, they say that, adversity really kind of brings out people's character, and from a federal standpoint, I think the reaction was as quick. I mean, government typically moves very, very slowly, as we know, and I think the reaction was fast. And I mean, I hear examples like the one you talked about earlier about, applying for that assistance and it showing up in your bank, 2 days later. And I'm sure not everybody has had that experience, but when you think of the sheer volume of people that have been going online and trying to tap into those resources, I mean, our systems just aren't built for that onslaught of
Yeah, I heard 1 million
participation.
people on Monday applied for the assistance. Monday
Yeah, it's
alone.
unbelievable numbers. So I would say the reaction federally has been very, very strong. I'm not sure what this is going to look like in terms of long-term debt load as we get out of this. And I've heard comments saying that from a financial standpoint, it's kind of like the Second World War all over again
Or
in
worse.
terms of the amount, or worse, depending on how long it goes. Now, keep in mind that the Second World War was a 6-year effort, I think, in terms of cost, and this is hopefully measured in months rather than years. I think provincially it was a little bit more clunky and that hits closer to home, right? It's how we operate our businesses, and the rules seem to be changing at points almost daily, where there was talk of non-essential workers not working, but then the list came out the next day of what is deemed essential and what's not, and they painted essential with a very, very broad brush. I mean, it worked in my favor. I can't complain about that, but it's keeping construction operating, and history will say whether that was the right call. The province went back and forth a little bit on the cannabis stores as an example. Saying at first that they needed to close, and then backtracking on that a couple of days later. And hey, let's be fair, none of these governments we've not traveled down this road before, any of us that are alive today. So, we're kind of, everyone's learning as they go. So, like
I
Rob said, can't be critical, and yeah, that's a lot of weight on a lot of people's shoulders right now.
yeah, I think I'm impressed with, we said with, like, provincial government went back and forth, but I think at the same time I'm happy with the fact they actually went back and forth, and they were willing to change their mind after they made a decision and go, well, I guess that's not going to work. I look at
Yeah.
my opinion of another country to the south of us, and it's not Mexico. is very rigid in their thinking, and I'm so scared how slow they were to respond, um, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah,
it's also
I'm impressed. So
sure. I mean,
and
the other with the U.S. has also got the added complexity of the states having so much individual power and a reluctance federally to take a broad approach to things. So we had, as an example, I mean, I think Florida just went into some sort of a lockdown mode like a week ago. So well into this thing, seeing massive spreading outbreaks across all these other states, and yet some of those states in the South were, really sitting on their hands through the whole thing. And
yeah,
churches, as of last Sunday, there were still churches opening in the South with 1,000 people showing up in attendance, and it's just complete disregard of what's going on everywhere else. And sadly, you see the number growth. I mean, when you consider the U.S. population is 10 times the size of Canada, and so you kind of use that 1 to 10 ratio as you're comparing things. I mean, we just passed the sad milestone yesterday or early this morning of 20,000 cases in Canada reported, which we know is just a record of what's been tested, so the number's likely higher, and 500 dead, which is I'm sure an accurate number. But when you multiply those by 10, it's nowhere near what we're seeing south of the border.
yeah,
So
numbers are crazy.
they are, and my heart goes out particularly on an Easter weekend of all these families, across the globe, really, that are dealing today with
Mourning.
mourning. Yeah,
Yeah,
and mourning in a sad, sad way, where there are people that are dying, and families that typically would get together in those moments of grief are unable to do so, and that's got to be. I mean, I can't imagine how heart wrenching that is, and then you combine that with just everybody's economic fears right now. It's a really, really tough time for a lot of people.
oh yeah, yeah. I do want to bring. I'm going to switch over to my screen. I do want to bring up just the stats, just so we do have it recorded what the stats are. So I'll bring up the window there. As of right now, total cases worldwide, 1,619,000 and change worldwide. So 1.6 million. Um, in the U.S., 466,000. I can't scroll this window.
And
Total
those
death.
early confirmed cases, don't forget, right? So they're very delayed in their testing. So I've heard reports saying it could be easily triple that.
Yeah, yeah. And and unfortunately, I think there's saying that Ontario is way slow behind on the testing and stuff. So our numbers could actually be much higher.
Right, and they likely are.
Uh,
I think the only numbers that are accurate are the death numbers or the
Right.
fatalities. It's everything else is ultimately conjectural because it's constrained or it's framed by the lack of or the policies and the accuracies of the different testing regimes. And so if even if you're South Korea and you've tested rigorously, those numbers are still they're not in any way precise. Their ballpark is a lot smaller than ours. Ours is huge, and I agree with Cam. But I think the only thing that is reliable, the only numbers that are really reliable, are the fatalities. And one of the things I just read this morning, I've taken a media hiatus for the last 24 hours because it was getting to be too much, but I didn't realize that New York was doing mass graves, and there's a picture of the pine boxes being put in these mass graves, and I think of Cam's comment about the rituals of grief and that we have, and how they're all being reframed and re-experienced in ways that must be heartrending, that you cannot convene as a family for any sort of solace, and how alone and isolating the grief process is. I'm not even sure they have access to the bodies
no, I don't
the way
think
you would in a
I
funeral
don't
home.
think so. I don't even think at the hospitals, if someone's in the hospital currently dying, I don't think they let you in. You're not allowed in the building.
Right.
So
No,
yeah,
that's
So
right. That's a lonely part of it is people are dying by themselves, right? And so and that would typically also be a time that family would often, be together for those final moments that are now not happening, and that, I mean, terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't want to imagine the vagaries and pain that is being imposed on those family members at this time.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
it's crazy having, unrelated, but a couple friends of cancer die recently. Yeah, it was, could be there for them, could be there for the family and stuff, and now just can't. Like this video chat is the best you're going to get unless you're in the same house.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I think the technology of this kind of thing, and we talked about that earlier, of both from a business standpoint where we're using platforms like this, but you know, we we would typically, I mean, we're social beings. We would typically, seek out each other, and Rob and I often would, go for a beer together with a few others, and we did that by Zoom last night, and that's the first time last weekend was the first time I ever did a online cocktail hour with anybody, and I think that's going to be a lot more common going forward, and I'm sure I'll be having a few of those even just this weekend. So. Um, then you think back to people that have lived through wartime where they were isolated in their homes and didn't even have that opportunity, and you're essentially in your home and blackout curtains and
Yes.
quarantine, and the option of seeing a relative in another town or in another country was unthinkable. And we had a similar call like this last Saturday with family in the UK, and we were able to share a beer and conversation and compare stories too. And it's interesting when you start comparing, our shopping grocery store experiences right now, and how all of that culturally has changed. And then you talk to somebody who lives in the UK, and you realize that they're doing exactly the same thing over there. This is a global shift in the way we interact with each other in public.
Mhm.
And some of those things are not going to go away afterwards. They will be the new normal when this is all over. So
Yeah,
it's very cultural shifting.
I'm never shaking your guys' hands again.
No,
What do
I think
you
that's going to disappear.
Yeah,
Can I just touch base on what Camp said? And I'm putting this out to both of you. What do you think the new normal is going to look like? And I mean in different contexts. Like I was thinking about like the new normal in an international airport might involve and continue to involve the face masks and the gloves that are ubiquitous now. But do you think that's going to be true in the grocery store, like, on a domestic level, or are we going to revert to the way we were before?
I don't think so. I think the most visual one is those plexiglass screens in front of the cashiers.
Ah, yeah.
I, I do not believe they're ever coming down. That will be a permanent fixture for shopping, that you will talk to a cashier through a plexiglass barrier, and they may, and the lines on the floor with the 6 foot spread might stay as well. I also think that there's going to be, people are realizing that there are other ways um, to shop, and we're seeing things like,
Yeah.
curbside pickup for restaurants as an example. I think people like that, and that's going to become common. That whole delivery thing, that Amazon and Walmart model of delivery to the home and saving you from having to go to the store, this will only strengthen that as part of our culture.
Hmm.
You mentioned the shaking of hands thing. I think that as a tradition is going to wane, if not disappear altogether.
Isn't that interesting? I never thought of the handshaking in particular. Really? Jeez.
yeah. I was at just before we shut everything down. It was a Thursday night. Was at the Motorama car show in Toronto at the
Hmm.
convention center next to the airport. I went with my boss. He took his car, and I shook one guy's hand, was a photographer, and as I shook it, I'm like, I don't actually know if I want to do this. Um, I find I'm a little more paranoid of things like that now. So my routine has changed. Not that I go out to see anyone, but yeah, I'm not going to shake your hand. I probably carry that on. No disrespect, but no. Um, Opening doors now, elbow. Don't don't
Yeah.
grab the handle unless I have to. If I have to, I stick my still wearing a coat. 0 degrees out this morning, kind of a change from the rest of the week. But hand in my coat sleeve to open the door. I bring my groceries home and wash them down with bleached soapy water, like all of them. All the boxes, all the packages. I just paranoid. Um,
Because it's interesting, but like underneath, and I'm not in any way being critical of, because I'm doing the same things as well, but what is underlying, the emotion underlines all of those acts, those gestures and habits, is suspicion, right? And it's not something, I do the same thing, and but ultimately what it implies is that we suspect we're afraid of infection, and we suspect others of being a threat to our health,
exactly. Yeah.
and will that, and not unjustifiably in this period, will, and that's always been true. You were always able to get a cold from a door handle, and the salmonella from prepared food, but will that suspicion carry forward? And if it does, that over a long term, I mean, we're living through something dramatic, but ultimately at this point, short term, even if it goes on for 2 years, in the course of a human life, it'll be significant, but and defining, but not as long term as a habit that becomes ingrained or fractured, like the handshaking. Like the three of us are the better part of half a century into being alive. The idea of not shaking someone's hand, this would be like a line in the sand, and everything that connection has that physical connection has implied for millennia, or well, not sorry, maybe not millennia, for hundreds of years. I'm not sure if its connection was to business as a way of as closing a deal or confirming an understanding between two parties. But whatever its social import was historically may be severed by this historical event. And I never thought of that, Cam, until you brought that up.
Yeah. No.
I think
Sorry, Cam. Go
the
ahead.
other change, just a final thought on that, is I think the organizations will understand that the people, I mean, a lot of companies do this already, but the working from home model for a lot of businesses actually works really well. And when you think of the cost of commercial real estate as an example, do you need 70 people all working in the same office space, or can they work using technology from their home office, turn commute time into productive time,
right? And environmentally, don't burn the gas.
And we're hearing some great stories about just overall things on the planet now too, right? It's almost like the planet's having a bit of a breather right now because there's less cars. I mean, man, my commute in the morning and my commute home, and it has historically taken me 40 minutes to get to work and double that to get home. And I cannot believe how short of a drive it is now because of the sheer reduction in volume on the road is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
If you think about, we were talking about debt and budgets. You think about provincial budgets or municipal budgets. If highway maintenance doesn't have to be as costly as a result, there's a huge savings there, and I think the real dividends are found environmentally. But people who commute, and Cam, you're obviously one of them. I don't know how you do it, and like psychologically, and just the amount of time. So, and I always wondered, like, how do you book a 9 a.m. meeting if you work on Bay Street? How can you do that? Because like the number of times that people are still sitting in cars, having expected to be at work for that time, but because of whatever's happened in front of them on the road, they can't get there. I would think there's an increased the dependability, if you will,
You just go that much
access
earlier.
to people.
That's really the key, right? So I work near the Toronto airport, and I'll typically leave my house at 5:30 in the morning, and I can, traffic is light, but I can guarantee that I can be in my office for 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, and it makes total sense because you're kind of ahead of the horde at that point. So you can do that. And if I have to, and I've had times where I have to be, downtown Toronto at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you just you know that if you put it in your GPS and kind of get a sense of peak times, that you're probably leaving the house at 5:30 in the morning to get there on time. That's
Yeah,
just the
well,
reality.
That's it. The amount of time that is essentially it's dead. I don't want to say dead time, but it's the transit time, which is, you could now use that time for a lot of other things.
yeah. So Susan
Sure.
used to work so we lived in Dundas previously. Susan worked in downtown Toronto, so she drove from Dundas to Waterdown GO station. So how long does that take? Rush hour traffic in the
Maybe
morning, 40 minutes?
15 minutes. What?
Oh yeah, no, it in first in the morning it took quite a while to get there. Minimum half hour.
Oh, all right.
And then wait and get on the train, and then the train was pushing an hour by the time it got into Union Station, and then you don't have your car, so now she has to walk from Union Station. I can't remember if she took a streetcar or took a subway north, but at the end, it took her 2 hours from leaving the house in the morning before she got to her desk, and then at night you did the whole thing again, and that was
All right.
assuming no major delays in the GO train service, um, or the walk was usually predictable because you just walked. Or the car home, the winter you had to clean the car off and then you had to warm it up a little bit and get on the road and then sit with everyone else. And yeah, it was brutal. So that's 4 hours of your
Uh,
day trying to get to or from work, and that's
So
it's a
what's
lot.
wasted
It's a
on
lot.
not
It's a lot
working.
of podcasts.
Geez, that's like roughly 18% of your day or something every day.
Yeah,
That's a wildly. I'm just thinking if Cam, from your perspective, like in a production model, 18% waste of a key resource like time. That's wildly inefficient.
but I
For
It
think
for
is. And what you end up doing, you end up adjusting for it. So in the morning, for instance, I mean, I got into the habit years ago of a combination of interesting podcasts or podcasts that I found
Right.
personally interesting, audio books as well. And then and my drive home is significantly longer because in the middle of the afternoon the traffic level is higher.
Mhm.
But I often use and with the ability of having hands-free telephone, in the car, um, all the calls that I missed throughout the day that I didn't get back to people, I make all of those calls on my drive home, and I
That's
use that.
interesting.
And I'm
So
often
that
leaving Mississauga, and I'm still on the phone when I pull in the driveway here.
so maybe in a lot of ways not dead times, just used in different contexts.
I guess
Correct.
my
Yeah.
my problem with that is twofold. One, um, you were talking about the productivity of it. The part of the problem is a lot of business they don't care about how long your commute time is. So it's not lost productivity to them because you still have to be at work at your set time. You have to stay till your set time, and what you do
Sure.
after those exact times is your problem, not theirs. They don't care it took you an extra 4 hours that you had to get up at 3 a.m. Stuff like
No.
that. And then my second problem is if you have to do work outside of work hours, and then poor Rob, this is a bad example for you, but um, yeah, the value of the fact that no, I got paid from 8 till 5, not to sit in traffic for 2 hours and do more work on the phone that I should have done at work. Something's wrong there to me, for a company perspective.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that. I think, a company doesn't dictate where you live. So they don't tell you that, hey, the company's in Mississauga, you need to move to Mississauga. I mean, if you choose to do so because that you can't bear the commute, that's entirely your choice. If in my case, I choose to live quite a ways away from where I work, but in an area that I absolutely love. And I,
Yeah,
live almost country living, and backing onto conservation land and the things that really are my passions in my life. But in my office, we had people that could live in, commute from Barrie as well. It's
yeah,
like,
Really? Wow.
yeah, and,
oh
the,
yeah.
and really the reality for me is, if you can't bear that commute, that's an hour and a half away. Don't apply for a job that's an hour and a half away. It's that
Mhm.
simple.
No, I guess my point wasn't necessarily the choice to live where you want and have a long commute. My point was working after hours for the company.
Sure.
That was
And
my thing. If you choose
and
to
I do
do
that.
that, that's fine. I come from the aviation world, and a lot of my instructor friends went on to fly bigger and larger planes. Um, but at one time, part of the premise was if you want a better job, you will take less money because it's about getting hours in your logbook, not money in your pocket. And in hindsight, 20 years later, they're all complaining the wages suck. And it's like, but you all chose to get the hours at these lower wages. Like, I knew a guy trying to get hours flying the skydive plane. He made $1 per trip. Now, granted,
Really?
this was back in the early 90s
Right.
when I was flying, but he'd take a load of skydivers up to 10,000 feet. They'd all jump out. He'd scream back down to the ground. He made $1. That's what he got.
Speaking as somebody who would, as one of the skydivers, I would want my pilot to be paid more than $1 an hour. I would.
You and
Yeah,
me both.
a lot of those
I would
things.
want him happy and caffeinated. I would want a very alert pilot.
And you know what?
And in a solid,
He did it.
marriage.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But and granted, at that time we were all young. We were in our 20s, and we loved to fly. So yeah, you give me a plane and give me $1 per trip, and we're all excited about, oh, I'm getting hours in my logbook. But then when you're 35 and 40 and you have a wife and kids, and you're flying your butt off and you're making no money. Because when I started flying, the big goal was, oh, you could work for a big airline, you can make good money, you could make 100,000 plus, and being a pilot was the dream. And it kind of changed. I was always told aviation went on a 10-year cycle, and when I got into it, it had peaked and was starting to come down, and it was at its bottom, and then someone flew some airplanes into some buildings in New York and Washington, and the valley of that 10-year cycle, it either went lower or didn't actually come back up, and a lot of that's affected. Um, and now the problem is they can't even find pilots. I could.
And you bring up an interesting example too, Travis, because um, I really wonder what the future looks like for airline travel after we're through this as well. Because anytime you do travel, I mean, the one common element you always see is they really pack a lot of people onto those planes, and you're sitting there essentially shoulder to shoulder with strangers
Yeah.
every time. I'm not sure what the appetite looks like for that after this. Do I want to sit in 4-seat row with two people I don't know on one side and another stranger on the other, and we're essentially sharing an armrest on both sides because the seating is so small, and I've got somebody who's coughing directly behind my headrest, and I wonder what that looks like afterwards. Is if people are just more or less reluctant to jump on the plane unless necessity makes it.
Yeah,
That they
business
have
wise,
to.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
do you?
The,
No, go
sorry,
ahead,
the
Rob.
other side of that though is I was thinking about globalism, and the one thing that underpins globalism is cheap gas. It's cheap travel, or financially reasonable travel, and I think a lot of the pressures were one of the underlying impacts of a lot of things we're talking about is there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on oil prices and on fuel prices. I think airfare might be cheaper, especially in the short term, as they try and woo people back. There may be a lot of incentives. I'd be looking at like cruise ships, which have never really appealed to me, other than the 24-hour buffet. And there's lots of people who love cruises. That's the kind of thing I'm wondering if that's going to change, because I think people look at a cruise ship now and what they see is a petri dish.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you didn't. I thought everybody got a balcony. I didn't realize there were people living inside, totally sort of no access to even fresh air.
There are.
And
We've gone on quite a number of cruises. I'll put myself in the category of somebody who absolutely loves them. But
okay,
we've been fortunate that we've always had a balcony room on every
Yep.
on the ships that we've been on, and we've taken that upgrade as a worthwhile expense because it gives you that added view, and it's really like having
Absolutely.
right? It's fantastic to sit up and have a glass of wine as you're pulling into a new Caribbean island, and or leaving at night and watching the sunset. It's amazing. So, and they've always done, in my opinion, a great job of keeping those ships clean. And the last time we got was a smaller ship, and it never felt crowded. It felt really no different than being in terms of having people around you compared to being in a decent sized hotel in the city.
Okay.
So you weren't tripping on people. Yeah, there was lineups at the bathroom sometimes, but there was also plenty of sit down restaurants with a waiter bringing your food. And
how about this point of view, though?
It will be effective for sure. And there's been some bad stories too, right, of infections breaking out on them in this particular pandemic. That will affect their reputation going forward too, at least in the short term.
I think it's time I show off my T-shirt.
Please do.
Titanic. White Star Line Titanic shirt from the museum in Halifax. To interrupt you there, a different viewpoint though, cruise ships. Crew members. My first, now ex-wife, before we were married, was trying to do, what do you call it? Staff on a cruise ship. And their living quarters was as low as you can go in the hull of that ship, like under the engines kind of thing, like nowhere even up there at all. And it's like even worse. And your jobs, you're there, and you're getting paid to be there, but this isn't your dream vacation that's turned horrible. This is your work that's just, anyway, just a different point of view, that you're there schlepping away trying to serve these people, and now they're trapped on this ship with you.
Right.
It sounds like a bad horror movie, with this infection running around, and God, I'm glad I'm stuck in my tiny little apartment.
No, but there's we were talking to our daughter. It works at a retirement home here in Dundas, and they've obviously, because of the age of the population and the fact that they're a higher risk group, they're putting just tons of protocol into place to keep everybody safe, which is great. But I mean, similar environment, right? So you've got kitchens that are preparing food for residents. Yep. You've got housekeeping staff. You've got essentially people working in, although it's a larger and a very nice building, you're still confined into a relatively small space, which I guess is why there have been sadly outbreaks at some of those homes across the country with pretty disastrous results. So but there's hospitals are the same, where you've got a lot of people working in close proximity in the ER of a hospital, or Rob, in your case, when you're with schools and colleges, and I've got two college age, or two kids in college right now, and their programs have very quickly ramped up to more online teaching. And in spite of the fact that in the past year, provincially, we saw some battling going back and forth between teachers and the province on online teaching, it's remarkable how quickly those models were able to be put in place when it was absolutely necessary because of the pandemic. And that's not going away. The online teaching model will continue to grow, and maybe if not at the elementary level, certainly at the post-secondary level.
Do you think?
I think there's going to be. I think there's going to be a preparedness as well, though, built into every level, from kindergarten to the PhD level. There's going to be every institution is going to start having a protocol. So how do we switch over to a digital domain for a short term, maybe as an ongoing way of supporting what we do. One of the things I've loved is the amount of creativity that has burst from almost every avenue of human endeavor has tackled this imposed reality in unique and creative ways. and education is certainly one of them. And there's people trying lots of different things. There are all these tools that are out there. None of them built for a pandemic, but being leveraged in a lot of cases really successfully for that. And I think the next stage of this will be looking at and evaluating what was done successfully, and looking at what kind of leadership develops from tech companies, but also educational institutions, to build and maximize that infrastructure. This is a golden period for communicative technologies, and I think there's a lot of potential for enriching what we do day to day, outside of the context of a pandemic. And it's pretty cool. In a lot of ways, it's been exhilarating. The number of platforms of trying to get my head around and integrate and use with students, and some of them you try or you look at and you go, oh, that's not going to work, and others you sense their potential, and now you're trying to realize that within the context of your own class.
Yeah, and I think something like this obviously affects change, for necessity. We all have to do things differently, so we come up with creative ways because we're forced to. But I'm wondering, so we talked about cruise ships, but then I think back of my high school, no air conditioning, crammed in a classroom, stuffy cruise ship bolted to the ground. Do you think, and I hate to use the word classroom size, do you think we will change the school model when we come out the other side of this? Will we go back to the same? Will we do more online? Will we do 4-day school weeks? Will we change, or will we just go right back to the way we did things before? Like we got lucky, we closed down for March break at a good time, and then we extended it by 2 weeks, and then I think we're done for the year. We're not going back to school till September, but do you think we would change how school is after going through this?
I think the 4-day the social and economic impetus for a 4-day work week is not connected to the pressures that come from a pandemic situation or worried about public health issues. If you want to reduce class sizes, one of the options is to go to a two-shift model, so that that you have two schools using the same building at different times in the same day. So you have, with very little overlap. So you could have a group of kids. So you could have, if you use the elementary school model, you could have a school being used by the first shift of kids that say starts early, like 7 a.m. and is done at it would be around noon, or and then you would have a second shift that started at say 12:30 and ended at 5 or 5:30. Like that would be the way to do it, and then you would shrink lunch hours accordingly. That would do it. If you wanted to shrink class sizes, that would take the pressures of access to infrastructure and buildings and that sort of thing away. But families that's a huge change for a lot of family. A lot of families, with working parents. I'm not sure there's that capacity to change. Now, if there's a simultaneous change in work life, and you get more and more parents working at home, so they have the flexibility of dropping their 5-year-old off at school earlier or later, and picking them up at reciprocally different times, that would facilitate it. But do families have the flexibility to absorb that kind of change? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think online learning, though, will continue. Like, I think there's a lot of people realizing, hey, this is a really interesting way of extending and enriching my program with my students. So I think that part will definitely continue. And I think, to Cam's point, I think the opportunity for college and university students or high school programs to maximize this are really are there's a lot of potential there. What I would worry about, and this could sound naive, but I don't think it is. There's still a significant portion of the population that does not have access um, to the technological infrastructure you need to run this at your home. And the other thing it also depends on is maturity. If you're talking about students of any age, if they're going to do this independently, there's a level of maturity that isn't there. I wouldn't think in a sustained way across the board until college or university. So I don't know what does this mean that we just lose kids who at 15 aren't mature enough to be online? Or the other concomitant article there or argument is that maybe they never were that mature. Maybe they're not showing up for the physical class either. I don't know. I don't know the answer, but people smarter than me will be wrestling with those questions.
Yeah, and I'd like to think like some businesses, for good or for bad, will realize, and Cam and I were talking about this last week, um, with people working from home, I would think to some degree they're seeing a savings in, or potential savings in, oh, if I can operate with everyone from home, why do I have a physical space that I'm paying rent for and other things? That people can be at home, and I'm lucky that my wife does work from home. Um, and so she's still working, if anything, busier than before, because she's in IT security. So with everyone working from home, more
Wow.
people need IT security. So,
Yeah.
so that's going up. And if you work for a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime, I'm sure you're busier too, because now everyone's watching your products. So,
Right.
Yeah. There's a duplication of services that go on between the business, the private sphere and the corporate sphere. Like, if RBC or if a big bank wants to, I would think a big portion of their population can work from home, and instead of RBC paying for the internet service and the toilets and the electricity and all the things that they provide at in a business setting, in an office, they download those expenses to the employee who are paying for those things anyway. I mean, my internet service is like yours, 24 hours. I'm always paying for the internet. Me using it on behalf of my employer is it doesn't take anything away from me. I'm going to have that internet service one way or the other. I don't know. I think we could simplify things in lots of ways, and that's a massive savings to companies. And ultimately, you like to think that savings will be passed on to the consumer down the road as well. Like, if it gets cheaper to operate a bank, hey, well, the banks still have to charge me whatever they're charging me for withdrawals, or if a company making a widget doesn't have to pay for those things, suddenly the overall price of the widget gets cheaper, I would think.
It does.
it should.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess I'm probably skeptical that would change, especially with the banks. Because I don't know, I would think, especially when things are hard times, if you can make a little extra money, you would. And then on the flip side, we would normally be talking about um, how the CEOs and whatnot of some of these companies would just pad their wallets a little more, or the stocks a little more for the shareholders or whatever. And it wouldn't necessarily, just because it's cheaper to make item, won't necessarily mean the consumer will see it. Some places, yes, because we talked about the airlines. When they start ramping up, how are you gonna convince me to get on a petri dish tube and fly with a bunch of people for a minimum of 2 hours? Well, if it's drastically cheaper, you will sway me to go. Whereas if it's still the same price as it was before, it's like, well, I don't need to travel that much.
Right.
So some businesses, I think, will lower the price, and I think other businesses won't necessarily lower the price. It'll stay status quo. but it's unprecedented time. So what we thought last week won't necessarily apply to next week. I don't know.
No, and that's very true. And I think if we continue this conversation in a week's time, the landscape will have changed again, just like it has between this week and last week. So we're living in fascinating times. We get to kind of watch history or be part of history as it's unfolding here, and for good or for bad. And these will definitely be days that we'll never forget.
Oh, totally.
Have you noticed how news feeds have slowed down though? Like that, like 2 weeks ago, major news organizations, their websites were changing. The articles were changing over, almost not hourly, but like if I checked in, to the CBC or the BBC or another national or institution with a global reach, the article that was there in the morning was on the headline was way down the site by lunch, and then whatever was front and center at lunch was by dinner was way down, and I check it. So I check it again before I went to bed, and it'd be again different. It's almost, but there's almost a fatigue, I think, that's set in there. Like they've slowed down on all of those sites. Maybe it's because there's less to report on. I don't know, but it's almost like they were treating everything like a sprint, and now they're treating it like a marathon. And there's a pacing. There's a very different pacing in news feeds right now, and it's not as frenetic. And it means, I think, that we're all calming down a bit too. Anyway,
Maybe.
I think. Well, you had said too, Rob. You had taken a bit of a media hiatus. I haven't necessarily purposely done that, but I've noticed, like when I pulled up the graph of the stats when this first started, I think I was refreshing the chart to see the numbers climb like every hour. Maybe not quite that bad, but it seemed that way.
Yeah.
And yesterday I looked at it in the morning, and I don't think I looked at it again the rest of the day. And I think that's part of what I've been doing is I was following it very closely. And I'm still interested, obviously we're doing this talk and stuff, but at the same time, it's like I looked so much in the first week, and maybe it has slowed down, and I'm not looking quite as much, because not quite as much is changing, but at the same time, I'm tired of looking. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but
yeah, there's that the fatigue.
And I find, it's one of those things that as this is unfolding, the story isn't really changing, the numbers are, and but it's fatiguing. It's mentally fatiguing and not healthy to be, especially with it's 24-hour news. I mean, we have CNN on in the car. We have, I had that same graph refreshing on my screen every hour, through the last week too. And at this point, it's like, yeah, I want to know what's going on. I'm obviously interested in what's happening across the world, but it has a mental and not a positive impact on me when I fully immerse in this stuff for days on end, and it's fatiguing, and it's like I need to give myself that break and turn all electronics off and spend time with friends and family, and if I can't get outside onto a hiking trail, at least get out in the backyard and get some fresh air. And
yeah,
sure.
And fortunately, we're in a position living here that we can still do that, but yeah, we need to give ourselves that break and find something a little more uplifting too, right? Because it's not a happy story.
Well, I get notifications from CBC, which is my main news source, and it's the last night. I think I do it once a day now. It says, with much of the world struggling through the COVID-19 pandemic, here are some good news stories from today.
Oh, that's good.
So they have a little thing, because we're all depressed by how many people have died and are going to die and everything else, and yeah, share a picture of a kitten on Facebook.
Exactly.
Well, it's easy to forget that there was a whole lot of other things going on in the world. One of the things I find reassuring is, and this is, I don't mean this to be bucolic, but even in my backyard, the squirrels are making their nest. They're as always in the spring. They're ticking me off because they cut through the branches, and there's branches, little bits of stuff all over my driveway. And this year I'm kind of like, there's something reassuring about the fact that the natural world goes on around us, maybe a little bit happier
I'm sure
than
they all
it
are.
normally would. And they could nature really doesn't care that much about the fact that we're going through what we're going through. There's something nice about being pulled out of oneself to look at that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the only other thing I would add to, I know that there's no shortage of stories of, people being ignorant out there, and people dropping their surgical gloves in the shopping mall parking lots for others to clean. But on the flip side of that, I'm seeing often, and maybe it's you see what you seek to see, but I'm seeing a higher level of kindness from a lot of people too. I'm seeing people being, extra diligent as they're dealing with strangers in the grocery store and giving them space and that sort of thing. I talked to my next door neighbor last Sunday, I think, older couple, retired, and we just were chatting over the fence, keeping our distance. And she commented after I made the offer that I was like the fifth or sixth neighbor who had offered to pick up groceries for her.
Nice.
And that's awesome.
So there's those stories too of just people looking out for one another. And I don't know about you guys, but I've connected with old friends on just a phone call or a text that I haven't talked to, or relatives that are overseas that I haven't spoken to in a couple of years. Just check in and say hi for not a birthday, and it's not the annual Christmas message, and it's just, hey, checking in. I know you're in Europe, and don't know how life is going for you, but just want you to know that I'm hoping that you're okay, kind of thing. So
yeah,
totally.
Maybe we all come out of it a little kinder as well.
Yeah, and just so you know, I've got the split screen up here with the three of you, and I have your names mixed up. So
That's okay.
Let me fix that.
I get to see Cam Goody. Awesome.
Those are big boots to fill.
Yeah, I probably can't handle it. You're right.
Well, at least people will comment that I became much better looking today, so that's good.
Oh, dude, that's awfully kind of you. Not true, but awfully kind of you.
It's hard to mix you up. You both sport the same haircut, so.
Yeah, that's true. So, well, Travis, thanks for organizing this conversation. I think we should keep keep doing this, and I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be part of something this cool. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Same with me. Thanks for organizing this. Great talking to both of you. Have a great day and stay safe out there.
Thanks.
Yeah, you both as well.
Thanks, guys. We'll hopefully we'll chat before then, but hopefully we'll do this in about a week's time.
Sounds good. All right.
Good day, gentlemen.
Yeah. Bye.